What's going on, football fans? Diggs Report here, back to you with another video. And today I got Ahmed with me, and we're going to talk about the recruiting class of 2023 and maybe get a little bit into 2024. Ahmed, happy to be here.
Yeah, great to have you, man. Thanks for having me on, man.
And not a problem. And I screwed that up. Sorry, guys. Okay, so like we did last year, we're just going to go through the top 10 recruits from the state of Maryland, and then we'll get into Maryland's class. And there's going to be some interesting things from this class that we're going to get into.
Yeah, Deshaun Womack obviously was the name that everyone was after. Four-star out of St. Francis Academy, Georgia, LSU, Maryland were among the top teams in that recruitment. And Georgia and Maryland never gave up down the stretch, but he opted for LSU, announced his commitment on July 4th. And the Tigers did a really good job. It was kind of with the scheme, obviously a combination of NIL, immediate impact, and whatnot. That was kind of tough for other teams to derail. Was definitely looking like early on that Maryland was a school that he would give a strong look at, and that prevailed. But it was just the lack of interest in staying closer to home that ended up being the hurdle that was too tough to climb.
Jason Moore from DeMatha signed with Ohio
Yeah,
State. And I mean, Ohio State is one of the best at developing defensive linemen. Let's face it. I mean,
yeah,
Larry
yeah.
Johnson is one of the best coaches out there.
Yep, and he
And
comes from the same school that produced Chase Young, who obviously went to Ohio State, worked with Larry Johnson, and Ohio State. Obviously, they were in the top group for a long, long time. Penn State and Notre Dame were in there. Notre Dame was the school that many expected to be the initial landing spot early in the process, but Maryland was always, kind of in the top group. Obviously, they were able to get an official visit in late June. Were able to kind of claw their way and kind of stay around, but was kind of always seen as maybe a recruit that don't get your hopes up on too much. And obviously he had a very productive senior year over at DeMatha, where he was able to just kind of be a instant impact in the interior, get the chance to move outside on the edge a little bit. So I think he has a great frame where they can kind of play him inside, add another 20, 30 pounds to him, and where he's able to maintain that athleticism. So a really good piece that's going to be staying within the Big Ten.
one thing you guys are noticing, a lot of these have length, and they look like if they fully develop, they're going to be physical freaks in college. And that's no different than these two that signed with South Carolina.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And you mentioned South Carolina. Obviously, they got the number 3 and 4 player on this list, Esme Zulu, four-star edge rusher out of Flowers, PG County, and then obviously Tosin Babalade, who the four-star tackle, obviously from DeMatha. Both those guys looked at Maryland. Obviously, Babalade was a little bit harder, with Maryland being the ultimate challenger to South Carolina. As in regards to Zulu, Ohio State was the initial school that was expected to land him over the summer, but uh, South Carolina never gave up, and it ended up being a pivotal commitment for the Gamecocks in the DMV, which obviously set the stage later on for Babalade and then Nick Harbor. So definitely a two talented guys, and I think with the Gamecocks they lost a lot of experience off the edge. So Zulu definitely, no one's ever really considered him a high end or immediate impact type of prospect, but I think he has a really athletic frame and skill set. And I think he kind of maybe needed a year to fill out his frame. But I think with South Carolina, with their attrition, I think that's a guy that will maybe get a chance to play a little bit earlier than anticipated.
Number 5 is a late riser
Yep.
from Dundalk.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit surprised that he ended up being at number 5. I think that might be a little bit inflated, respectfully. But yeah, he was a guy that he had a really good senior season, exploited at Ole Miss, Penn State, Michigan State in that top group, and his coaches did a good job of kind of pushing Penn State there. So that kind of solidified that recruitment, to his commitment on during the February signing period.
Notre Dame
So,
got into the DMV with Houston.
yeah, Devin Houston, obviously, he was another guy. He was transplant in the area. Maryland was the first school that ended up offering him, but Maryland liked him. We're able to get him on campus, I believe, for one spring practice, but whenever really in the mix for him. Notre Dame was considered a long time expected landing spot. So good one going for the Irish. But The tide turns a little bit on 7th and 8th, where you have Neo Avery and Dylan Gooden, two former teammates out of good counsel. Especially for Avery, I think he's a guy where he's a quarterback, and some schools thought maybe not quarterback, but put him as an athlete, maybe a tight end, and then once he switched to the defensive side of the ball, play defensive end, I think it kind of really changed his recruitment. Immediately became a top target for Maryland. James Thomas led for both Avery and Gooden down the stretch. So two really quality guys that fill one key needs and two hail from a key school in Maryland's footprint.
Sam Green, number 9. This is somebody he signed with USC. This is somebody that might be a little underrated, if we're being honest.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the biggest thing with him is just his size. A 6 foot interior defensive lineman. I think that was kind of the biggest hiccup. And maybe another inch or two, and I think he would have. There was a very realistic chance that he ended up in Maryland, but yeah, I think he was a guy that he transferred over from Rock Creek, so I think he was a guy that was able to kind of shine on some college radars earlier this spring, and was a really productive piece alongside Deshaun Womack and Isaiah Neal in that St. Francis trenches.
Speaking of St. Francis, we have another one. Their running back who signed with Charlotte. Yeah,
Yeah.
you think the certain head coach from Charlotte had a little something to do with that?
Yeah, I think it was a perfect storm, honestly. I think it kind of parted ways with Boston College, and it gets a chance to go to Charlotte, being a instant impact, immediate impact freshman. And especially the way you look at the landscape of college football now, where you can go to school for a year or two, dominate at a lower level, and then rise up, find a good opportunity. I think that's a really good spot for Deval Robinson. But even still, I think he gets a chance to not only play for his former head coach, also gets a chance to play for Mike Miller, Maryland's former tight end coach and co-offensive coordinator. So I think that's a guy that a lot of fans are going to see in college football down the line.
Yeah, he could dominate over at Charlotte if we're being quite honest. And just to know, we used to do 24/7. Now we're on 3 for this year. And that's the top 10 recruits. And something about this class, I mean, there are a lot of guys that are just ultra athletic. I mean, that's been the theme, not only to Maryland's recruiting class, but just the recruiting class in general. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I think that's definitely agree. I mean, obviously, just athleticism in the area with just track athletes and whatnot. I think that was kind of a big focus. And then obviously, especially in the secondary wide receiver, a lot of position coaches were targeting guys that had the top end 4.3, 4.4 speed to kind of bolster the roster in that regard. So yeah, definitely a lot of speed in this class.
All right, we're going to move over to Maryland's class now. And let's be honest, they did a great job with rebuilding the wide receiver room after losing all the talent that they had this year, and they're going to lose a few more next year. Great job at linebacker, got at least 4, maybe a few others. And just with athletic guys that could be either offense or defense. And we're going to get into a little bit more of that later. And Ahmed, what are your thoughts? Anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. I think just the linebacker room as a whole between Neo Avery, Mike Harris, Dylan Gooden, all those guys were really big. DJ Samuels, another guy I think he's going to play a lot. And then yeah, you look at the offensive side of the ball. Zeke Avid, I think is a guy that maybe gets overlooked. Has a really good basketball background, and then well, you hear it a lot in basketball. If you have that 6'2", 6'3" frame, that real athletic frame, and you're not getting the college basketball looks, yeah, football, you have a chance to kind of be a guy. And he kind of had the reputation as a basketball guy. So when he gave football a chance, the ceiling was there, the potential was there. He just needs to put it together. So when you look at guys like him and Braden Wazowski, I think obviously Wazowski's on campus now, but just getting a chance to kind of learn and then apply your talent. I think that's kind of what the room does. Ryan Manning's been a really quality signing, and as a guy that's been really drawing some rave reviews through workouts so far. So yeah, wide receiver room. It's obviously Maryland went after some top end wide receivers this cycle. Obviously Cam Seldon was a guy. Nick Harbor was a guy who I actually ended up hearing he was just going to play street wide receiver in college. So I think that was going to be kind of interesting to see. So but nonetheless, definitely at some key pieces. And then Rico Walker, I think, is a guy where you just look at him. I think much has been made about him, where he can be a tight end, he can be an outside linebacker, and I think he has potential as an outside linebacker, or excuse me, NFL outside linebacker. But when you look at the mold of the Loxy tight end, that the tall, athletic, fluid in space that's Rico Walker, the way he moves, the way he runs is just different. So, lot of key pieces there.
All right, we're gonna get into each individual signee now. And last year we did kind of a best of, but this year we're gonna do player comparisons. So we're gonna say what former or even current Maryland player that these kids remind us of. Or if we can't think of one, we don't have to. So let's start with Nino Avery, edge rusher from Good Counsel.
I see him as a little bit more of a twitchier around Jami. Just think that the way
Ooh,
that
I
he's
like
able to
that.
kind of get in the backfield, I think that's a good comp for him.
Yeah, I'm watching this kid play, and I'm just like, oh my God, if you fully develop him, he's going to be terrorizing Big Ten quarterbacks. Michael Harris, which this one's interesting because his twin brother Andrew, we had no idea what was going on with them. Michael signed with Maryland, while Andrew signed with Central Florida. Very interesting recruit.
Yeah, I think so too. I think he's yeah, finding it kind of for him is kind of tough. I think because he's kind of a tweener. So I think maybe you could think of like an Antoine Brooks mold. I don't know that he has the same type of impact as Antoine Brooks, but just kind of being that tweener where maybe a little bit too small for safety, and kind of build into being a linebacker. So maybe that's it.
Rico Walker, who, as you mentioned, he's listed as an edge, but they're going to try him out at tight end too. And there's nothing really wrong with that. You don't want to be the school that tells a kid no at a certain position and then he goes to another school and he ends up dominating at that position. You don't want another
Yeah,
Trace McSorley.
yeah, exactly. I think Rico really is a lot like Corey, just in the sense of Corey was, a wide receiver turned tight end, but just a super uber athletic prospect. Put in space, but needs to kind of bulk up to, you know, become a better blocking tight end. And I think that's kind of what I envision out of Rico as a tight end. So I see a lot of some similarities and kind of how they play there.
Dylan Gooden, who was the son of Doc Gooden, former Mets pitcher. It's crazy because they got uh, DJ Strawberry, which is Daryl Strawberry's son. They got him for basketball, and now they got Gooden for football.
Yeah, I'm not sure about a comparison with him. I just think he's
Yeah,
a
he's a
real
tough one. I can't
high
even think of
ceiling.
one either.
Yeah, he's a high potential kind of kid. I think he needs a year or two, but fits in as a sandbacker.
Yeah, I mean with Avery and Gooden, Avery's an edge rusher. Gooden is your Sam. I got a comparison for these two. I think of Avery as Terrell Suggs. I think of Gooden as Jared Johnson because of how well those two worked so well together during their time as Ravens. And with Gooden, I am so high on this kid because this is somebody that I see him. He can rush the passer, he can drop into coverage, he can stop the run. I mean, if he physically develops, he could be a do it all linebacker. He will never come off the field for a defense. So high on this kid. He has so much potential. But yeah, with Thomas, like I was saying, there was one highlight where he was literally on the other side of the field, running back breaks through, and Thomas gets him at the 2 yard line.
Yeah, both him and Jonathan Akins are both speed demons.
Oh yeah.
But those guys have really good top end speed, and I think that was kind of why Baker prioritized them this cycle. Yeah, comps are kind of tough for current Maryland players. So I don't
Even for
know of
former
a
Maryland
comp.
players, I think it's tough.
Yeah, but definitely a piece I think will kind of slide into the secondary and be an integral piece in the rotation in year two.
I'll let you take the next one, and then I'll give you my thoughts on him.
Dylan Fontes, yeah, I think he's a guy who's an interior lineman.
All right.
Maybe like a Great China Rose where you can just kind of move like that, but add some good size to him. So maybe I think that could kind of fit. I know obviously China Rose he played a lot more on the outside a little bit this year. Obviously a little bit staying up edge rusher on the as a jack linebacker. So but yeah, good looking player.
Yeah, he lined up as a defensive end and a defensive tackle. Maybe he's a guy when he bulks up. Maybe he's playing all three defensive line positions at one point. I don't know. All I know is he's good.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a really good piece. He's already up on campus now.
DeMarcus Coley from North Carolina. This kid is a very good safety. He's very good. I just don't know if he's a strong or a free or if he's both.
Yeah, I think he's going to be more of a strong fill in that like Bo Braid role.
And how good were Dante Trader and Bo Braid last year? How good were those two?
Yeah, I mean, they looked really good. Obviously, really flowed in year one. Being able to rotate in 2021 kind of gave them a chance to kind of get their feet wet a little bit. And then Wes Neighbors, I think, did a really good job last year and last spring, just kind of bringing them along, getting them up to speed, getting them kind of acclimated to kind of what to expect, with the as full-time starting safeties.
All right, we're going to move on to a couple wide receivers, Sean Williams and Zeke Avid.
Yeah, Sean Williams is was St. John's top receiver, a really good boundary receiver, and I think he's a really good blocking receiver as well. I think that was something I think it's kind of interesting where you kind of see that similarity out of him, that trait out of him, and then Raheem Jarrett, a guy out of St. John's as well, who was a really good blocking receiver from Maryland last year as well. So I think he's going to be a guy that probably plays a little bit more. Don't really have a comp for him, but I think he has really good straight line speed, really good. He's able to get over the middle of the field really well. Has really extensive route tree, but he does a really good job of getting separation, whether it is downfield or across the middle. So I think he's just kind of like a not a route technician essentially, but he's just very fundamentally sound. I think he has good enough speed to be able to kind of maximize that skill set to, like I said, just get that separation and be able to make plays in space.
Zeke, meanwhile, 6'3". He also plays basketball. And when I was watching the highlights, he just looked like a jump ball specialist, which you can never have too many of those. And it's hard to come up with a comp for him as well. I just can't think of the last time Maryland had somebody like this. I think he's going to be a guy that outplays his ranking, if I'm being quite honest, because I think he's ranked a little too low.
Yeah, I think he's a good guy one on ones. Wouldn't be like my first trade, but yeah, I think that's it's a fair characterization of part of his game.
We have Dylan Wade from Orlando. Okay, he's listed as tight end, but he does want to play, what was it, defensive end?
No, tight end.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a tight end. Signed as a tight end. He's kind of again kind of like Rico Walker, where you kind of see that mold of what Loxie wants as a tight end. Wade is exactly that. So I think he kind of fits into that. Now, if he position switches down the line, I think that would be more so because, um, frankly, just because of the tight end room would be a little bit overstocked. And Rico was a guy that, can kind of play both. And Wade could be a guy that maybe he fills in, as an outside backer or as a defensive end or whatnot. But for now, I see him what he was initially expected to enroll in January. Played basketball this fall or this winter, so he'll enroll next summer. So when he does that, I expect him to stay on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I do too. I watch his highlights and I just think, wow, this kid could be an all conference type of tight end. That's what I'm seeing
Yeah,
with him.
definitely that. And when you kind of talk about all conference, I think a guy or maybe a performing ranking, I think DJ Samuels, I think is
Oh
the
yeah.
guy that I have in my mind. I think he's a guy that, obviously he broke Brian Cushing's sack record at Bergen Catholic as a junior. And it's not like Bergen Catholic doesn't produce talent. DJ Samuels, I mean, the biggest knock on him is going to be that size at 6 foot. And that's legit, but he does a really good job of being twitchy. Obviously at the high school level, he played running back as well to kind of show even at that 6 foot, 240-pound size, he's able to move it, carry it well. So I think that's kind of what gives him confidence. So I think that he will be a guy that, again, plays a lot. Yeah, I think obviously when you look at a guy like TJ Samuels, where he is able to kind of build the room or whatnot, I think he's going to be a guy where he kind of gets settled in January and then is able to kind of make that move.
Okay, guys. Unfortunately, we're not going to have time to talk about the 2024 class. We're just going to end it with the 2023. But with all that being said, moving on to another corner who we had talked about earlier, Jonathan Atkins from another one from Florida.
Yeah, like I mentioned with Kevis Thomas, he's another guy with just great top end speed. Came in for early June visit, excuse me. Baker was on him dating back to last February and kind of stayed consistent. Track guy as well. Has some very impressive times. Named the specific times I don't have the top of my head right now, but there's another guy when you look at just the infusion of speed in Maryland's roster. He's another guy that kind of fits that bill. So good size for a corner at 5'11", 170, good, good nickel corner, slot corner, and whatnot. So I think it's a really solid addition.
Yeah, with this cornerback, are we really shocked that they have a lot of speed there after what Deontay Banks and Jacorian Bennett ran at the combine?
Yeah, that's very true.
So yeah, whatever the strength and conditioning and what the training staff is doing, I mean, they deserve a medal for what they're doing with the Maryland players because it's not just that corner; it's all over. They're really developing these kids well.
Yeah, obviously, and then you look ahead to Braden Wislowski
Yeah.
is an athlete out of Southern Columbia. Play a lot of running back, but he'll play a little bit of running back at Maryland, but a lot more slot receiver. Get a chance to kind of move him and move him around, use him in a number of different ways. The backfield, things like that. Just kind of just a special piece where you just kind of put the ball in his hands in space and kind of let him work. So 5'10", 180 athlete. It's a guy that came and camped for Maryland. They immediately were all over him, and the rest is history.
Yeah, don't let this 84 steer your judgment. He's going to outplay that probably instantly. Robert Long, quarterback. Uh, I'm going to say this. Would you agree that he might have had the uh, toughest schedule out of anyone in this recruiting class?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely possible. Between just the top New Jersey talent, and obviously just the WCAC. The WCAC at the end of the day, only 14. So if you're St. John's, you're only playing three of them and whatnot. But yeah, obviously, I think Chan, especially going up from junior to senior year, which for fans looking at from a development perspective, that's year one versus year two is him as a starting quarterback. So I think he was able to kind of make a big jump. And another thing that really stuck out was just the fact that he's kind of consistent with his workouts, getting in the lab, whether it's gym, things like that. The work ethic and whatnot has exactly what you want as a quarterback. So I think it's definitely a piece, long term piece in the quarterback room.
This next prospect, I'll admit, I don't know too much about him, so I'm just going to let you take over this one.
Yeah, DeAndre Duffus. He's an offensive lineman out of Florida, picked Maryland over Indiana and Syracuse. Came up for, I think, every home game. If not, he missed one. But a really big guy. I think he's going to be an impact guard where I think he can possibly play swing tackle, but I think guard is kind of where he fits in best. He was able to enroll early as well, so he's able to kind of build on that already really big frame. So I think he's a guy that we could possibly see him on the depth chart in year two.
Ryan Manny from St. Francis. I really
Yeah,
like this kid. I think he might be my favorite wide receiver out of these guys. I
yeah,
really
I think
like
he's
his highlight tape. And
yeah, really good piece. Obviously, he transferred over from Bowie into St. Francis. Really, excuse me, really high ceiling as well. When you talk about work ethic, he has it. The kind of just the way he carries himself is always kind of impressed folks and whatnot. So I think he's a guy, from a route running perspective, I think that's kind of his bread and butter. Really good speed and gets in and out of his breaks really well. So continue to hear that he's really acclimating himself well, taking it all in, transitioning well in College Park. He was able to start practicing with the team the day after signing day. So I think that only improves his chances. So definitely a guy that I think will see the field a lot in year one. Um, and then obviously you have Michael Mormon, who's another guy. He's kind of a sleeper prospect out of Wise. Another track guy. When you talk about Jonathan Akins, a couple others in this class as well, just with their speed. I think he's a guy when you talk with Wise and coach Dalon Parrish. He's a guy that they just kind of used him all over, nickel corner, outside corner, safety, rover. So I think that he kind of be that guy where kind of a jack of all trades for Maryland secondary, but with that nickel corner and obviously with that speed, 6'1", 165. I think he's another guy that kind of is a long term piece in that secondary.
okay, so do you think he's going to be a corner or a safety? Because you said they had him all over the place of Wise.
I think
Could
he'll
be
be a
either.
corner.
He'll be a corner. Yeah, I think he could be either. And you don't have to be locked into corner or safety. If he works out a corner, that's fine. If you think it's better at safety, that's fine too. But I mean, all over the place, that just adds versatility to the secondary. And there
Yeah,
is nothing wrong with versatility in football. Believe me on
absolutely,
that.
absolutely. And then he obviously Maryland was able to sign a running back from Nolan Ray out of Brother
And he
Rice.
lost his most of his senior year due to injury, right? But he was a
Yep.
beast his junior year.
Yeah, yeah, I think he was a good piece. So, good to stockpile talent in the running back room. And the guy I really like, he's next up, Daniel Wingate,
Oh
6'4",
yeah.
215-pound linebacker. I think he's going to be an inside guy. I think initially I kind of liked him as an outside guy, just kind of because of his length. But I think he's a guy where he's able to, if playing inside a little bit, he's able to play sideline to sideline really well, and use that athleticism as a Mike backer to kind of fill the gaps. So I really like him. He was probably the second most impactful player on that Pilati defense, only behind Gabe Williams, who was just kind of always found himself around the ball. But I think this is a guy that's going to be a really, really sneaky good addition on the defensive side of the ball.
Levon Johnson. And this is somebody that I actually did have trouble looking for his highlights. I don't think I even found his highlights. So I knew he was a transfer. I just couldn't remember what school he transferred from.
Got connected with one of the analysts, his head coach, and one of the analysts. They have a really AJ Rising. They have a really good relationship, and that's kind of how Levon got on the radar, and whatnot. He came up for an unofficial in June as he kind of ironed out his academic requirements. Once everything was kind of squared away, ended up picking up an official offer, and about a week and a half later, he ended up committing. So I think he's another guy when you look at Dylan Fontes being an interior guy. I think LeBron kind of fits that bill as well, 6'3", 295. Really
It
good
looks like he's a
guys,
little more
good.
developed than Dylan is.
Yeah, I think a lot of schools were kind of monitoring him, eyeing him, keeping an eye on how his grades looked out. But Maryland did a good job just kind of, yeah, just staying ahead of the curve there and landing the sleeper. And then, yeah, Maryland didn't have to go far for the next commit. East Orange wide receiver Josh Richards,
And
6'3",
I love, and
Bud.
I would, you mind if I take this one?
Sure.
Yeah, Josh Richards, who was, he was his school's best player. I mean, he was their leading receiver, and he also led them in interceptions. Very good player. I mean, 6'3", 175 pounds. I mean, you get this kid developed, and this guy could be the limit. He could turn into a very good receiver. Very good. Another guy, great speed. Yeah, Richards. I think this is going to be a name for everybody to keep an eye on.
Yeah, obviously big frame wide receiver, so if it's that Dante Demas type of mold where you always kind of want to add where you have already guys like Leon Houghton already on the roster, so just kind of keep stockpiling and adding complementary wide receivers to keep that wide receiver room diverse. Speaking of diverse, AJ Szymanski, 6'5", 245 wide receiver, tight end, excuse me, out of Loyola Blakefield. I think he's a guy who kind of make an impact. He's more of a bounce guy, but I think he could potentially make an earlier impact as a blocking tight end just once he's able to kind of spend that first year just adding through strength and conditioning. I think he does a really good job just kind of splitting out well, splitting out wide, using his hands, soft hands, to be able to make those plays in space. When I watch him, he's a capable blocker at the high school level. So I think that technique could kind of translate over. He was eligible to enroll early, opted not to enjoy the rest of his senior year. So he'll get here in June.
I got no problem with that. Is this kind of the replacement for losing CJ Dupree? Because kind of reminds me a little bit of him.
I think Szymanski's more of a long-term piece, but
Mhm.
yeah, definitely could kind of fit that mold.
Davon Nelson, the safety from Staten Island, uh,
Yeah,
6'2" safety. I always like height in a safety.
yeah, and he's
Is he
really
free or strong?
no. Tavon's a free. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
Tavon
Cooley's a
he's
strong,
free.
like you said earlier.
Yeah, Tavon's free, so he can play kind of behind Trader. But I think he's a guy came from the same high school as Dylan Pontus, obviously. So I think he was a really big piece on that defensive side of the ball, and kind of came in. West Virginia was the top competition, but Maryland really didn't have much trouble beating the Mountaineers in this one.
And Tamaris Walker, who I interviewed this kid. I really liked interviewing this kid, and I cannot believe how low he is ranked. They got him as a center prospect, and to me, he's a Big Ten offensive lineman. You get this kid developed, he's going to be in the two deep sooner than you think, and I don't know, he could turn into an all Big Ten center. That's just what I'm seeing. He's a mauler.
Yeah, I
That's
think
the
the
best
big
way
thing
to
with him is
describe
just
him.
kind of reframing his body, and just getting into shape and whatnot. But I think he's, a lot of, and he doesn't have as much experience playing center. He's primarily played guard throughout his high school career, so spent a lot more time over this senior year just kind of getting center down and learning the technique, getting acclimated with the position, whatnot. So maybe year one, year two, whatnot, he's kind of able to kind of be a serviceable backup to either Colton Deary or Eric Harris, however that plays out. So, but definitely good to go to dig into McDonough. And then obviously they dug back into Pilati for that second commit this cycle. Alex Moore, he's listed as a wide receiver, but he'll come in as a safety. Not as much film on him, but he's a guy just really good range. 4.5 guy. He came in at Maryland and ran a 4.4, and he had his back
Another
was hurt.
speedster and defensive back. What a shock.
Yeah, exactly. So it was the fact that he was kind of banged up, ran that, and the combination of the film, him being a local kid, that kind of all culminated to him being that.
Okay, Ahmed, who's your top three? Top three favorite commits.
I'll go Ryan Manning, DJ Samuels, and Rico Walker.
I'll go. I'll go Maris Walker. I'll go Dylan Gooden and Nino Avery. Those are my three
Yeah,
favorites.
I think that's fair. I think Neo, as soon as I finished saying the three, I think that was the fourth I kind of considered, but I think he's going to be a really
Yeah,
big piece. He's going to play a ton, instant impact kind of kid. So, yeah, I'm definitely excited to see how this class fares.
yeah. All in all, I mean, they did a great job. They got depth for wide receiver. They got depth for DBs. They got linebacker depth, and then in the transfer portal, they hit the offensive line that they needed, and even got more wide receiver help for immediate. So they did a great job with this class, and the sky's the limit for this. I think a lot of these kids are going to be outplaying their rankings, and this is going to be exciting. It really is, especially after the
Yeah,
season that they had. And with all that being said, that is all that we have for today. Ahmed, thank you so much for joining me. Hopefully, we'll get to talk about the 2024 class before signing day. We'll see what happens. As always, I'm Diggs Report, and I'll see you guys next time.